Hey now, welcome to the Dirty Side of the Track, America's leading Formula One podcast. It's your boy Sap. I'm here with Rob. We are so excited you've joined us this week. Rob, tell everybody what to anticipate on today's episode.
Well, we've got an action-packed episode this week, and we normally worry about non-race weeks that we're going to have to just sort of waffle on for 45 minutes and try and create some content.
Never.
Never. But actually, we're jam-packed. We've had a guest that we've been chasing down for a while, none other than Dr Obbs, if you're familiar with Dr Obbs from the Twitter sphere. And he also agreed to do DRS, so we have a DRS on this week's episode. But like many modern Formula One tracks, we don't just want one DRS zone, we want multiple DRS zones. So in addition to Dr Obbs and his interview plus DRS, we also have listener Kitt came on to do the DRS as well. We also have an update on F1 crap, we have an Australian preview, and we got news and social. So we probably need to stop blabbering on and get on with it, Brian.
You're the one blabbering. Let's do it. So this week in the news, I'll talk a little bit about Fernando Alonso. He was interviewed, and he made an interesting comparison to this year's Aston Martins. He said, quote, Ferrari, when it was 2020, they were very bad, or 2021. And then the following year, last year, they were fighting for the championship. And they won the first 2 or 3 Grand Prix, and Ferrari made a huge step last year. He paused, and then he says, Brawn GP, also huge. And so he points out that with a non-regulation change, Aston Martin's is probably a bigger jump, as both of those items happened after reg changes, the Ferraris of last year and the Brawn GP year. Rob, the reason I'm pointing out Fernando looking at history and talking about these changes is if anyone hasn't listened to our Brawn GP episode from last year, they need to go check it out because that is a great story. And the fact that Fernando is quoting and thinking about the 2009 Brawn GP year is pretty cool. It was a year in which a car followed the reg changes and just blew it out of the water. And normally when you see that reg changes happen, that's when a car blows it out of the water. However, Aston Martin is doing it in a non-reg change year, and that's worth a point. But to also go back to our dirtysideofthetrack.com website and check out the Brawn GP special episode.
Wow, you shoehorned in an obscure link. I was looking at the notes to see, I just thought you were talking about like Aston Martin. He's thinking it's a bigger achievement.
But they should go check out our Brawn GP episode.
It isn't a bigger achievement. It just means they screwed it up last year, so they've had a second go this year. That's all it really means.
Man, you are pessimistic.
Oh, look how bad they were last year. Look how bad they were.
They were. It was basically they were 2 dumpsters rolling down the road.
Exactly. So they just had another go. They basically, you can almost see the designer of that whole setup kind of just off the drawing board, crumpled it all up, threw it across the room to the bin on the other side of the room. And just
I don't know if I
again.
agree.
But
yeah.
I mean, I don't know that you could say it's a bigger achievement because Brawn won it. So let's just wait till the end of the year and see how his Aston gets on, right? So. Yep. I love a good shoehorning in of a past episode, Brian. You are a master at that. I love it.
DirtySideOfTheTrack.com, special episodes, Brawn GP.
We saw technical director James Key left McLaren this week. And David Sanchez, which I think we mentioned was leaving had left Ferrari, but we didn't know where he was going. He's rocked up at McLaren, so it's a little bit of... I don't know, you can call it silly season when it's like non-drivers or principals, but it's the merry-go-round of F1. So we'll wait and see what kind of impact that can have. If McLaren suddenly take a huge upturn, then everyone will say, well, it was obviously James Key's fault. But
yeah, like it happens that fast.
Yeah, exactly. We also saw Valtteri was obviously very upset with his performance last week. Paul had kind of alluded to it in his review. He feels that he actually picked up some damage like right at the beginning. So when we had that coming together and we had Nick debris everywhere over the track, he thinks he ran over something which compromised the floor. And in years gone by, you'd kind of say, well, that's not really a good excuse. But I think we all saw it last year at Silverstone. Max ran over a piece of AlphaTauri, wasn't very big, got wedged underneath the floor, and it really compromised the performance of the car. So maybe there's something in it. In fact, actually carry on listening to when we talked to Dr Obbs later, we actually covered this exact thing about kind of the shift towards how important the floor is on the car these days. And there's lots of design elements. And talking of design elements, I think you've got something you want to highlight, Brian.
I do. So we've threatened to do this a couple times, and we're not going to do it today totally, but we need to learn more about Adrian Newey. This guy is just tremendous. We've talked about him a bit. We've said maybe he'll be our first non-driver Veils Tales we do. I think there's an opportunity there, Rob. Put that in the to-do list for us. But starting in 92, when Adrian Newey, who, for anyone who doesn't know, is the sort of technical designer of the cars at Red Bull. And he has been credited throughout time with a ton of victories and championships. And Driver 61 put out an amazing sort of infographic. In 1992, Adrian Newey worked at Williams. He worked on the car there. Nigel Mansell was the world champion. And in 92 at Williams, they won the Drivers and Constructors Championship. So let's start moving forward. 93, this time it's Alain Prost. Still at Williams, both driver and constructor, Adrian Newey. 94, Constructor Championship, Adrian Newey. The only reason they didn't win driver was a dude named Schumacher was doing his thing somewhere else. Skip 95, go to 96, still Williams, driver and constructor Damon Hill. 97, driver and constructor at Williams, Jacques Villeneuve. Win both titles again in 97.
Who was that, the one in 97?
Well, it was a little fella who's been on the podcast.
This is Jacques Villeneuve, and you're listening to the dirty side of the track.
Thank you very much for reminding me. And then, but Adrian Newey said, you know what, I'm out of here. And in 98, he moves to McLaren. And in 98, Mika Häkkinen is the world champion. McLaren world driver and constructor championship, Adrian Newey. Then in 99, just the drivers championship for Mika. And then you go in 2010, a little gap. And there's some pieces to the story here we'll cover in the Vale's Tales coming up. 2010. 2011, 2012, and 2013, all at Red Bull, all Sebastian, all double world champions, drivers and constructors under Newey. And then, of course, Mercedes kind of did some dominance there for a bit. But then in 2021, we all know Max won the drivers' championship in a Newey car. Last year, a double for Red Bull again, drivers and constructors. So just holy cow. I don't have more than that. That's just amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've solved it. Everybody wants to get a more balanced F1 championship and have more cars being able to compete. So I've got two possible solutions. Adrian Newey is either completely banned from Formula One so that he can't favour one car over the rest, or he has to become an independent consultant where he has to go around all the teams, stand at the back of the garage, look at the cars and go, really? You want the rear wing like that? And just kind of give some tips to everybody and share the love. That would really kind of equalise the grid, I think. No more fancy DRS or any artificial ways of grouping all the cars together. Just let Adrian Newey have at it.
Just some Newey time.
Exactly. Like stop hammer time, but it's Newey time.
Yeah.
Right, talking of kind of things that we found on social media, we had Vincenzo Landino on the pod a couple of episodes back, and he kind of really looks into kind of the financial and those kind of stats of the sport. And he posted up a team social performance leaderboard, which really looked at the number of impressions and engagements that teams get through their social media channels. Brian, I'm really focusing on this because I think you've got a lot to do to really raise our dirty side game, because, you know, we do get a few more followers, we get some posts with some decent impressions, but number of impressions, which, by the way, I don't quite know how they measure impressions. What's the difference between a view and an impression? Because you're our Twitter intern. What's the difference?
Yes. Well, the view, someone's viewed it, and the impression, it left an impression on them.
Okay. So, on impressions, Ferrari, Scuderia Ferrari, impressions, 122 million.
We had that on our poll this week. That's nothing.
And by the way, this is just from the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix.
Really?
So, yeah,
wow.
122 million.
That's a ton.
Red Bull, 110 million. Sorry, actually, Mercedes were in second with 111 million. I mean, this is insane. They actually kind of then turned it into ranked by engagements, which I don't know what the difference is between an engagement now and an impression and a view and a social value, but there's lots of different metrics.
It's obvious. I mean, but I can't explain it to you. We'll do it later.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's absolutely phenomenal. But the difference, the delta between the top and the bottom here, so Ferrari at 122 million impressions, Haas, 13 million. I mean, still better than the dirty side. Well, just. I think we must have had 12 million, right?
Easily. The difference in value, 3.3 million in value for Ferrari, 245 grand for Haas. Holy cow. Now, that aside, can I ask you a question, Rob? Since you've pointed out the difference here. A, what do you think that means to the teams? But B, could you imagine being the social admin at Ferrari? That's a lot to manage. I mean, that's... That's a big deal.
The one time when you were out and I had to take up the Twitter account for a day, that scared the hell out of me because my phone's like ringing at me every few seconds. And okay, it's not like we've got 122 million things coming through. I can't even imagine that the app can support that many notifications.
Exactly.
They must have notifications turned off, right? Because that would just...
It looks like my power bill when my girls are all blow drying their hairs. The meter just keeps rolling. 1, 4, 5, 6, 7. Speaking of social, we did a poll this week. Thank you, everybody who answered. Yeah. It was something that last week Rob and I kind of started talking about and realized we saw a difference in our perspective on this. And we actually started going over WhatsApp to each other through the week, kind of debating it a little more. And I said, this might be something fun to kind of see what everybody else thinks. So we put a poll out. Will any team challenge Red Bull for the Constructors' Championship? So looking past the drivers, but for a Constructors' Championship, and challenge is the keyword, before the new regs in 2026. So again, for folks who may be new, whenever F1 changes the regulations, there is a big opportunity for people to redesign their cars and get caught up. But as the regulations kind of settle in, sometimes you see domination occur. And I don't think we're going to see, a continued domination like we see now through the rest of these regs until 2026. Rob does. And the vote, we had almost 200 people vote, just a couple shy of 200, so thank you. The vote was 56% think a team will start to challenge Red Bull sometime during these regulations. 44, that's the difference between 156. It's 44 left.
Thanks, Brian.
I think Red Bull will just continue to drive off into the sunset. I can't wait to see what happens.
Yeah, I love this vote. I thought it drove great engagement. We had so many comments on there as well, like the back and forth. I think Andy, that had been on from the Discord, that was on the Discord episode, kind of almost came up with a third view, which kind of almost split the difference of actually they'll probably change the regs earlier than 2026 to prevent a domination. That's almost like a third twist on it. So it was interesting to see. It wasn't split down the middle, but not far off.
Very
There's
close.
people that are kind of, we've almost got like 100 in each camp there of kind of it will or it won't. And when I was talking to my son, he's like, well, do you think they'll go on another domination spree like Mercedes then? I said, well, no, think about it. Mercedes dominated for, was it 7 in a row? Was it 8 in a row? I can't remember now. But whatever it was, let's call it 8. Let's say it was 8 in a row. I'm only saying that Red Bull need 2 more years. 2026 isn't as far away as everybody thinks. Like it's this day way in the future. You've given them
2023.
Right?
You've locked them into constructors this year. I mean, I think that's what it looks like.
So I'm saying like this, they run away into the distance. They've only got to do that 2 more times in a row, which is nothing like Mercedes did it 7 or 8 times in a row, and then suddenly we're at the new regs. So it's just.
But there was no cost cap back then. I mean, I'm putting a lot of stock in the cost cap.
Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah, I am.
All I think that does is help the delta between the top and the bottom. I think the pack closes, but I think the teams at the top, the people that have the Adrian Newey's, Anyway, it was fantastic because it's not a debate that can be settled until we get to 2026. The
comments were great,
and the Twitter sphere kind of didn't have a landslide one way or the other. So it's obviously a debate which is kind of splits the listeners and splits us because you're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah, I'll let you live with that. And so, then we get to the quick review of, as Rob wants to call it, the video vault. He was hedging there waiting for me to introduce this, so I had to call it that. Brian's video vault is next.
Yes.
So I got to be honest, I did not have a lot through the week. For 2 reasons. One, I was looking for new video content on YouTube and on social, and it was really dry the beginning of this week. Plus, I got into Clarkson's Farm Season 2. And so, was I on his YouTube as much? Nah, I was watching Jeremy do his thing. But...
just quickly, before you move on that, right?
Yeah, it's not far from where you grew up, by the way. I did some Googling late last night.
Exactly. Clarkson Farm is just brilliant. And if ever a show really needs to be like a daily, I would watch it without any editing. Just give me day. I don't need to wait another year for another round of harvesting and do Clarkson's Farm 3 next year. Just give me daily streaming. I'd watch that. I'd watch Caleb plow a field every day. Anyway.
So that's a low bar for you in terms of content. But it was a low bar for me. I was dying. And so I actually ended up going back. I watched the 2019 F1 season as a meme. I was desperate for content. I was in the desert, and then a couple things came through for me. And these will be the only 2 we actually put out on the links. One was Formula One 2022 Friends intro. Now, this is only so basically they take clips from 2022, even though it came out in the last few weeks, and they put the Friends song on it. It's great. Please go watch it. I laughed. I watched it twice. It just worked for me. So I thought that was hilarious. But then here's the capper. This is great. F1 driver Esteban Ocon breaks down racing movies on GQ Sports. It's 13 minutes. I've seen a bunch of these over the years where they have an expert come in and talk about movies and is it real or not from, snipers and Marines and various people in different industries, chefs, whole thing. And I love when they do this with drivers. So first off, I got to be completely honest. I'm nothing if not honest. I had this on in the background as it starts, and I could not understand some of the stuff he was saying. And then I heard him say Grand Prix, and I'm like, did his accent get stronger since it's an all-French team and it's French teammates, and are they just speaking French? And then I realized the whole video is in French, and it was subtitles. So it took me a good 3 seconds or 4 seconds to realize I wasn't just and I thought to myself, what an idiot. So, but it is so good. It is so great. It is great. They start with Driven, which is, as everyone knows, a guilty pleasure of mine. And he reviews Driven from an F1 driver's perspective. We debated this in an upcoming DRS guest. Such a cheesy movie with Sylvester Stallone as Joe Tanto. I must have been a saint in a former life for this video to have been launched last night. And so it was great. They go through cars. They talk about speed, Need for Speed, Rush, Taxi, Ford versus Ferrari. I mean, just please watch it. It's 13 minutes. You're going to enjoy it.
Excellent. Talking of cars, this is an amazing segue, by the way.
Yeah, nailed it so far.
Every time I tried to type the name of our next guest into our notes or anything I was working on, it kept capitalizing it. It kept capitalizing Kitt, K-I-T-T, to capitals K-I-T-T, because I think everything on my computer knows that I'm just a Knight Rider nerd.
Night Industries 2000.
Exactly. If I'm writing that down, everything was assuming. So I had to keep changing it back down to just normal Kitt. Because that's who we had on. Listener Kitt answered our call to arms to come on DRS. We sat down with him this week to have a chat about all things Formula One. So let's have a little listen to DRS with Kitt.
We are super excited to have Kitt, a member of the Dirty Side, join us today. Kitt, welcome. Thanks for joining.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. We love doing the chance to kind of talk to members of the Dirty Side and fans like us. And we were kind of chatting a little bit before this, but you have a sort of long fandom. We were talking about a variety of things, and you mentioned a lot of things from the past. How long have you been an F1 fan?
So I've been watching pretty much on and off since '96. Took a couple-year break between the end of the Schumacher reign and the beginning of Hamilton and Vettel's domination era. So, probably that'd be 18 years, I think, something like that.
Wow.
A little bit more.
That's amazing.
And as we always tend to ask, especially for people from the US, how did you even stumble across F1? Because as Brian always says, it's kind of always the little kind of backroom secret over here, that it's like the secret club. No one really talks about it. I definitely found that when I moved here 6 years ago. It was like, where did all the F1 fans go? And they're coming back now. But how did you get into it all that time ago?
So my dad had watched it on and off back when Mario Andretti had run in the late 70s, and even with Lauda. And he kind of saw Michael Schumacher developing, and my family's kind of from a German heritage, so he liked Michael, and he introduced it to me. And when Michael went to Ferrari, and just kind of got hooked on the noise. The V10s just sounded so cool to me as a kid. Hashtag bring back the V10s.
Agree.
Right? Probably won't happen, but one can hope. And then,
do you know what? Sorry, I was saying, even if they don't bring them back, let's just make up the weight limit or something, so they can put speakers on that at least play the noise of it, right?
Yeah. Just like the BMW i8, where it has the engine sound pumped into the cabin.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. So then, along the way of those, on and off, but sort of totaling 18 years of F1 fandom here in the States, who have you really sort of gotten behind along the way and kind of leading to 23? Kitt, who do you like now?
Yeah, so Michael Schumacher obviously was, my favorite as a kid growing up. I also like Kimi Räikkönen. I'm a big Iceman fan.
Yes.
Because, he's just very him, a very unique personality. And also just his crossover with NASCAR and his interest in doing other types of racing like rally and all that is just really cool to see. I like his versatility. Lewis is awesome, both on and off the track. Kind of a big fan of his and Vettel. And then now I'm pulling for Alonso. I'm all on the Alonso hype train this year. And it's kind of transferred because I'm a Seb fan, and Seb retired at Aston Martin and Alonso came in, and I'd always liked Alonso. He took over the kind of fun attitude Schumacher had when he won 2 in a row. So I was like, okay, Fernando's back. I like this transition of fandom. So yeah, I'm on the Nando hype train this year.
That's amazing.
Just one thing that you just said, I never even thought about this, but you mentioned Kimi, right?
Right.
Can you imagine if Kimi had still been racing like now and he was being forced to be part of the Drive to Survive stuff?
Oh, no.
I mean, I think we would. He's a man of few words, but I think we would have gotten a lot of something like this.
Just leave me alone. I know what to do.
Get out of my face, Netflix. I know what I'm doing.
I would have loved to have tried to see them put the Netflix camera into front of Kimi's face.
Yeah, and just like what Daniel said when he was with Renault, where he's like, Netflix is a bunch of, like kind of like that. You just hear like the candid, like, what the fuck is going on?
Oh man, that's great.
Yeah, Kimi's awesome.
Definitely. So, you mentioned the Fernando train that a lot of us are getting aboard and curious to see what Aston does this year. Is it like Haas last year coming out of the gates big and then, people catching them a little bit? Or like, what are your thoughts kind of for 23? Do you see anybody touching Red Bull? Like, what are some of Kitt's favorite storylines?
Yeah, so I think with Aston Martin, I think they're really actually for real this year. They have Dan Fallows, who's this, Newey's ex-right-hand man at Red Bull for all those years. And not only did he bring knowledge of the RB8 team from last year over and the aero and the floor, knowledge he had, but also just the development process that they had at Red Bull is coming over to Aston with Stroll's money behind it. And so that combination, I think, is really, lets Aston take that step up to challenge the top three, the big three, Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull. That being said, I think because of Red Bull's lack of development and wind tunnel time compared to Aston, where Aston finished 7th, so they have way more time in the wind tunnel.
Yeah.
Like it's insane, right? Like they went from 7th to finishing on the podium in the first race out, and the fastest in testing. Like, so they have all this wind tunnel time banked and all this, CFD time banked, but they're also second in the constructors and in the drivers. It's, or third in the drivers. But yeah, so I think Red Bull is going to not have the development pace to be, 30 seconds, 40 seconds ahead every race. And I think Aston is going to creep up, and you'll probably see Ferrari bring some upgrades, and McLaren's going to bring some upgrades, and Baku. So I think you're going to see a little bit more parity probably after round 4 or 5. But I think, it's going to be Red Bull, at least for the first 3 races, pretty up there.
We were joking recently that the sponsors of Red Bull should ask Max to slow down because no one will see the car for the next few races.
I saw a great meme about that where it was like that bird, and it was like the Red Bull when they see their car not on TV, and it was like the bird was like, "Listen here, you little,"
too fast.
Like, wait a minute. Too fast. Slow down. Try to slow down. 2 seconds a lap slower.
We're not paying money to never be seen.
There was that whole radio message where his engineer was like, "You need slow it down. Please slow down. Please slow down."
Yeah, we need target time slower than you're doing.
And then he did it like 4 laps in a row. He's like, "You have to slow down now."
I'm done saying it.
Yeah, he got so mad.
I love team radio.
I mean,
me too.
The only, and I totally agree with you, Kitt, that although I do have my eternal optimism, will hope that the good old safety car that we will probably see about 17 times in Jeddah will completely destroy any kind of strategy or anything and really kind of level the playing field. So that's my hope, but I'm with you. I think first few races tend to favor the Red Bull car. Like last year's Bahrain only probably didn't because they both blew up, but then they came back and I think Max won Jeddah last year, right? Ahead of both the Ferraris. So unless we get some kind of kooky stuff happening, maybe with the safety car, probably the same thing happens again. And then where do we go? Australia before we go to some like forced almost mid-season break because of China not being there, right? We get like 3 races and then we have to go on starvation mode for a month.
It's like IndyCar where they have their season opener and then they have like 4 weeks or 3.5 weeks of no race, and then it's Texas. Yeah. I think definitely Jeddah will be a little bit more parity to it. And the only reason I think Bahrain didn't have any is because normally it has 2 safety cars on average, and it didn't this year, had none, or had the virtual safety car, but it didn't have a full safety car. So there was no full course yellow, no bunching up. So it just allowed the Red Bull to stretch its legs because they have less tire deg than everyone else, except for Alonso. But Alonso got caught up behind the Mercedes because of the bad start and getting kind of bumped in the butt by Stroll. So, that was so funny to me because he was like, "Who hit me? They need to be investigated." And the team's like, "Don't worry, we'll look into it." And then they didn't tell him until after the race. They're like, "By the way, Stroll hit you on lap 1." He's like, "Oh, whatever."
I'm sure it went a little different. Don't worry, the owner's son hit you.
Yeah, exactly. And he's like, "Oh, right, the guy who gave me this rocket ship." Okay,
yeah, paying my paychecks.
Right, the $20 million or whatever he earns. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it was curious last year at Coda. Was it Coda? I think it was when they came together. Stroll and Fernando took flight. I mean, he took flight, and I mean, normally Fernando is really spicy. Things like this with Lewis. What an idiot! Yeah. What an idiot! But with Stroll, he's like, "Oh yeah, it's fine, no problem. I was looking to take a little trip."
Yeah, and then he was also like, he came back and finished 7th after taking flight like that, like at Coda. I was like, that's ridiculous.
How'd the car make it? I don't understand.
But because I think it didn't destroy the floor when he landed because it landed so flat, and then it only needed a new front wing. Like all he had to do was change his front wing. Lance has got the worst of it because it punctured his tire, which exploded his rear wing.
Right.
But then Fernando, all he did was like lift off over the wheel, so it just took his front wing off, and then he was like, "Okay, I need to replace that. We're good to go."
It is bizarre. It is a sport of such small margins because when you look at that tagging of Stroll on Alonso, 9 times out of 10 that's a rear puncher. And
absolutely.
That just obviously caught at the right angle, right speed, right whatever to just really do nothing. It reminds me of kind of when I think it was Max at Silverstone last year where they couldn't work out what was going wrong with the car. The telemetry was fine, but he was going slow and everyone was overtaking him. And they get to the end. I think it was a piece of AlphaTauri that was lodged underneath the car in one of the tunnels. And you think, wow, a small piece of debris, not Nick debris, lodged in the underside of the floor. If you disrupt those tunnels underneath the car and everything's ground effect these days, that was the visible. Like they obviously had no clue what was causing the problem. And it is a sport of such fine margins. Like you say, Alonso coming down flat, drives on. Alonso comes down ever so slightly at an angle, like you say, it probably destroys the floor, and it's good night Vienna.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And it was so weird because like he only lost like 10 points of downforce, Max did at Silverstone, but it was so much at that track, like specifically the way that the corners are at Silverstone, that he was just so slow. It's ridiculous. Yeah. F1 is so fine like that. It's every point of downforce matters.
And I would say the margins are fine, not just in F1, but when it comes to the 100 seconds of DRS. The internet's fastest F1 quiz show, and I segued that almost beautifully. So I would say today, we're very fortunate that Rob is doing the timing because he knows how to actually work a clock, as opposed to me when I screw it up. But I'll be doing the question, so I guess I'll ask you, Kitt, are you ready for the 100 seconds of DRS?
Oh, I am.
Fantastic. I am ready as well. Rob, whenever you're ready, count us in.
Messing this up because it's the person that does the time that does all the checking. Who are you to be checking? You're just running it, okay? I'm the man with the power this time. So, stand down.
Sounds like you're flexing your power trip. Take it easy, buddy.
My thumb is hovering over the start button on the timer. So
we're ready. We're ready.
We will start the 100 seconds of DRS in 3, 2, 1, go.
Kitt, first poster you had on your bedroom wall.
Star Wars, Return of the Jedi.
Best young driver in F1.
I would say Teo Porcher probably right now.
A favorite F1 track.
Oh, that's really tough. Coda.
Great track. Favorite restaurant.
Red Robin.
Excellent. Is it pronounced GIF or GIF?
GIF. If you pronounce it GIF, that's peanut butter.
Thank you. Mario or Luigi?
I would say Mario.
Good call. Favorite F1 livery on a car all time?
All time?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Rothman's Williams. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I think I may know the answer to this, but cats or dogs?
Cats.
Yes. Favorite non-motorsport sport?
Baseball.
Excellent. Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Sleep in or up early?
Go to sleep at 11, wake up at 7.
Okay. Fill in the blank for me here, Kitt. F1 in America is
the most popular motorsport currently by young demographic.
Well thought out there. What's a favorite thing to do on a rainy day?
Watch video essays on YouTube.
Okay. DRS, good or bad?
Good for what the series is. Wish we didn't need to use it.
Tires, similarly, tires, interesting or not interesting?
Interesting. I like multiple compounds.
Yes. What is your favorite food?
Chicken fingers.
What is my favorite food?
Steak medium rare.
That's not. That is not correct. Wait, that was stop.
Yeah, you.
What was the
I
favorite
wish we could
food?
have got more.
I don't even know.
Kit,
That's too-
because it's unfortunate. You got Brian who likes to read the questions in slow motion.
Oh, come on. Come on. I did fine. I don't
That
even know
was
my
good.
favorite.
like to do on a rainy day.
Look, it was setting the mood of the question because it was a rainy day, right?
I mean, it's hard being me sometimes. I don't know. My favorite food, great question. I think it's got to be like pizza, or today maybe a burrito. And in particular, I like a nice Chipotle burrito. I got a soft spot in my heart for Chipotle. I don't know why, but I got like, I don't know. You ask me tomorrow, it'll be a different answer.
Right. Pizza's a good choice.
I mean, I'm outside Chicago. We got all kinds of pizzas, and it doesn't have to be the thick stuff necessarily.
No, I like all kinds of pizzas. New York, Chicago, Detroit, whatever.
Definitely.
It's all pizza is good.
Agreed. Well, thank you so much for doing this, Kitt, for taking the time to chat with us and to share some of your fandom thoughts about F1. Just super cool that you did this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate you having me on. It was real fun.
And before we
Anytime.
let you go, here you go. Who's going to win the title, and who's going to be the constructor that wins?
Title, I mean, I have to say Max at the moment, but we'll see how it plays out. That's just the vibe I get, given Red Bull's development cycle and everything. Constructors, I would say probably Red Bull, but Aston could probably give them a run for their money.
Ooh.
I think if Aston brings the developments like they're hinting at, and Red Bull doesn't have the wind tunnel time, it could be close. in the
So
end.
you are the conductor of the Aston
Oh,
Martin Fernando
yeah.
train. I didn't understand.
Yeah.
I thought you were just a
Mission 33.
I thought you
right?
were just a paying passenger. I didn't understand. You're actually the conductor of the train. I like this.
Yeah, I mean, if Stroll can finish 6th and the rocket ship with 2 dislocated, broken wrists, I think that car is very good.
All right. So everybody knows when you watch Aston Martin in the standings, the higher up they are, the more Kitt will be celebrating.
Yes, and the more green I'll be wearing each successive weekend.
Really cool. And for anybody else who wants to do the 100 seconds of DRS, please let us know. And it would be great to have you join Kitt and others like Valtteri who have done this with us. So, Kitt, thanks so much.
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, Kitt, that was great. I'm still going to refer to you in the Knight Rider sense, though, I think. I'm not going to be able to shake that. I know that there's the whole Skittles tie-in, but it's not strong enough to break the Knight Rider thing for me. Right, moving on. One other thing we had was F1 crap. We didn't do the review last week from the entries we had for the Saudi GP. We had a number in here, and this week I actually remembered to put people's names next to them so you get credit for submitting yours. So here we go. And again, I don't think anybody was really very close on any of these, but we had Andy, who said that Leclerc would qualify 3rd, start 13th, be up to 7th by the end of the first lap, climb to 2nd by the first pits, come out 5th, then have an unscheduled pit stop, come out 13th, and then retire. Well, if he had done that, at least it would have been a more entertaining race for Leclerc. We might have seen him on the TV coverage, but no. none of
Witness
that
protection
happened.
for both Ferraris.
Yeah, exactly. JP went short but sweet. 3rd lap, 7th corner. Stroll hits the wall. His right wheel flies off and hits Gasly in the side pod. Good, but no cigar. We didn't have any of that. Nimrod, no safety cars, virtual safety cars, or red flags, and the only requirement will be a gearbox failure. Well, safety car put pay to that one. As you're not going to be my friend anymore, but you're saying no Ferraris through to Q3. Both Astons retire. Merck lower than 5th, and Max wins. Now, you did then also append that. Max wins with his legs out of the car while smoking a cigar.
I think we're getting close to that.
we are, but Max didn't win. So...
No, but I mean, like, when we get to our Aussie GP preview this episode, I think that might be part of it.
Lee went for Max on pole, Checo 2nd. Lap 3, they collide, and Checo sends Max into a wall. Huge pile-up. Checo somehow escapes. Alonso wins. Carlos 2nd. George 3rd. And Charles retires. Again, if only. Was not that exciting up front. We also had... Oh, now you're going to have to help me out here because it's not the name on DRS was not the name on Discord, right? R. Baggio said safe... Renato, yes, there it is. It's the name. People different names on different places confuses me. Safety car does more laps than a Ferrari. Renato, No.
It was a good guess, though. I like these. These are great.
No, yes, but I'm taking offense here at the Ferrari bashing. It seems to be a theme in F1 crap. And then we come down to ours. I said Hulkenberg was going to do a 360 on lap 27, catch it and drive on like nothing happened, and the close-up on Steiner's face would become a meme. I wish that had happened because Haas really didn't have much fun. And Brian said Gasly would be in the points by lap 25, but will retire before lap 42. Didn't happen either.
He did not retire.
We will be putting out the call to arms. Some more F1 crap for Australia. Let's get creative. Let's go for some really out there ones. Better than Brian's just, someone will do something by a lap and then retire. But,
What?
Anyone.
What's wrong with mine? It's good enough.
I think you need to be more creative. More creative we need. Someone's going to get one close.
I'm going to get more creative for Australia, I promise. Okay. It'll involve Crocodile Dundee, a boomerang. And that's not a knife.
Oh my gosh, king of accents as always. Right, talking of people with an accent.
That's a knife. Sorry, I had to finish the quote.
So I've come this way over the pond, and I've left the UK behind to come over to the US. The guest that we have on now has done the opposite. He grew up in the US and has since gone over to the UK. And let's have a little listen in now as we caught up with Dr. Obbs. Right, this week we've managed to get another guest to come on and do the 100 seconds of DRS. Another one that I've probably been stalking a little bit like I stalked Vincenzo to get him on. The guy that we've got on today is one half of a podcast that started not long after ours, one that I listen to a lot, the Tech Heads podcast, which you may know is formed of Bryson Sullivan and today's guest, Dr. Obbs. So welcome to the Dirty Side, Dr. Obbs.
Hey, Rob, how's it going? Good to be here. I have to say, I am 1/3 of the Tech Heads. We also have Molly Oxner, who is a rock star. Molly keeps Bryson and I sane. Like, she's awesome.
It is great. It is great to have you on, Dr. Obbs. And yes, 1/3 of the amazing Tech Heads podcast. How did you I followed you for a long time.
Thank you.
Of the way you dissect cars, races, the technical aspects of it, and make it understandable for just average fans like me. Rob's smarter than I am, so he probably gets it anyway. But how did you get into F1? And how did your, whether it's your background, your degrees, what kind of turned you into the technical aspects of it as well that made it interesting for you?
Yeah, good question. So I think I've always been a gearhead ever since I was a child. I think for me, it just began when I was young and I went to a race in San Antonio, an IMSA race, long time ago. I mean, when I was a young kid. And that was the first time I ever saw a proper race car, and I was just hooked. I was hooked by the sound, I was hooked by the roar, and then from then on I was just into cars. I was into racing. When I started going to college then, and I always kind of had my first car was a 1990 Toyota Supra, so it was my parents had no idea when I got that car that I was going to be a speed demon with that thing, because I had the turbo all modded out. That thing was fast. But so I was always kind of tinkering with cars a bit. And so when I started going to college, I knew I wanted to be an engineer. So I actually joined the Formula team. So I was on Formula student. I went to the University of Oklahoma. I was a Formula student there. I was actually on suspension team. My love for aerodynamics and everything fluids didn't come until I was later in my undergrad. But then at that point, I decided, hey, I want to get my graduate degree. So I got my master's and my PhD all in fluid dynamics. So I'm deep down a fluids nerd. I mean, I'm an aero guy. So that's my jam. So then after that, I just, I got a job in the energy sector, but I always kind of just kept that fire for everything motorsports, everything automotive from there. So then I really started diving deep into technical side. But it wasn't until I moved to Germany in 2018 that I got really hooked on Formula One. I used to follow IndyCar and NASCAR and all that stuff in the States, but it wasn't until I moved to Germany where motorsports F1 is almost a religion. And so it's so big. So then I was there for 3.5 years and I was hooked. I was watching all the races. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go to the Hockenheim ring before they actually took it away. But yeah, and now I'm in the UK, so it's like even worse. Everybody here loves Formula One.
That's how I knew Rob might be an F1 fan. We used to work together, and
Oh, cool.
I heard the accent. And one day I said, "Hey, any chance you like F1?" Because as you know, in the States, it's not as common, and so finding an F1 fan is a big deal. But that's amazing. So, like, one more question, Rob. Sorry, when you think now, since your fandom grew in Germany and into the UK, and how you kind of look at it, like, do you feel that the fluids and the aero and the dynamics you talk about of a car are appreciated by most fans? Because it's the most technical, it feels like, of motorsport, yet there's so much more, it feels, that people don't understand. It's like, where do you kind of like put that needle of people's understanding of how complex and technical these cars really are?
Yeah, I think when I venture to explain something, whether it's through the podcast or, we just started the Tech Heads or the Tech Bites segments on our YouTube page, where we try to explain like complex technical topics in small bite-sized chunks. And what I try to venture to do is to take something complicated and start out with kind of the simplest terminologies. And I think my background actually, in school, when I was doing my PhD, I was actually teaching courses at the university. So I taught courses to undergrads on dynamics. So that's where a lot of race car dynamics information for me comes from. I taught them on Aerofluids Lab. I taught Aerofluids Lab, which we had a cool little, like a small wind tunnel in the lab.
Wow.
And we had a cool little, like a wing with pressure taps all over the wing. And it was really slick. But I think that's where like my passion to like teach and explain things came from. And I get really like jazzed up whenever I start talking about deep technical things, but I try to find a way to do it to where it's easily digestible and easy to understand. And some people may say, oh, well, you're oversimplifying it, but really you have to explain it at that level first to go deeper. So I think if you trigger somebody to ask a follow-on question from a simplified understanding, they can go deeper, or they can ask you more questions from there.
Yeah, because I remember listening to it was either the first or second when you first launched the Tech Heads, and wow, I tell you what, there's two things I noticed about it. One, like Brian said, you managed to describe technical aspects of the sport, and I won't say in a F1 for Dummies way, because you don't take it down to, oh, here's a car, it has four wheels, right? You do fly at a higher level. You did have me reaching for the thesaurus a couple of times, saying what are they talking about? But it is at a level that you can follow along. The other thing that I really like that you guys do, and I don't know if you did this by design, is you're not, or while you obviously are fans and you do have affiliations with teams, when it comes to aerodynamics and the way that the sport, the technical side works, you have no favorites. You don't care. You just call what you're seeing in front of you. So it's like, as soon as testing came out, I'm straight on your Twitter channel to see what you've seen and what you've seen on the front wing and what you've thought of shapes of various cars, because you're not trying to worry about saying, oh, I'm going to really big up this particular team and trash talk this one. You just say what you see. And I just really interested to know, is that what you wanted the angle of Tech Heads to be? That it's just, forget the badge on the car. We're just going to tell you what we're seeing out on the track.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, F1 can be quite a toxic environment sometimes, whenever you really dive into like the team stan accounts or the driver stan accounts, as I call them. So we really tried to just kind of walk that central line of, we just focused on the tech. Now, obviously, we have kind of the teams that we pull for, but we are tech nerds first and foremost. Like, that is why we're here. And a great example of that is, like, for me, even though, I would call myself a Red Bull fan, I am, from a technology standpoint, like, I am a Mercedes tech stan. I mean, DAS and like,
yes,
their rear suspension squatting under load. Like, that is the coolest thing in the world. Like, they've got the best tech. And even though the no pods from the W13 or the half pods from the W14 didn't end up working, they were super cool from an innovative standpoint. So I think first and foremost, we are tech people, and we really try to approach it from that standpoint. And we try to be fair and balanced as much as possible, because a lot of the focus gets on like Ferrari tech or Mercedes tech and things like that, but we try and really cover the full grid. Yeah.
I wish you'd been around when one of our first episodes, we had our friend Paul, who works in F1, and he's worked in F1 for years, and he was in the Brawn GP team, and he came on and he gave us an interview about the Brawn GP year and all this kind of stuff, and halfway through it we kind of went, yeah, because the big thing that year was like, you guys, Brawn, you came up with that double diffuser. What the hell was that? And despite the fact he worked for that team for the entire year, it was the most awkward, I've heard him where he was like, yeah, don't really know. So he had to go off, and he did actually come back on. Like next time he came on, he kind of came back with like something that one of his ex-colleagues had almost written down verbatim to try to explain what a double diffuser was. I'm still not quite sure I understand it, other than it was magic and witchcraft.
It's when you diffuse twice, but it's not as good as a triple diffuser. I mean, come on, everyone knows this.
Right. Yeah. No, but I mean, and we try to do those kinds of things. We have tech segments in the podcast where we talk about like, double diffusers. We talk about F ducts. We talk about like exhaust blown diffusers. I mean, all these different like sort of historical technical things. And I think that's the thing that keeps me coming to F1. I mean, yeah, okay, look, like 2020, some of the seasons when Mercedes was dominating, like, you were kind of like, oh, okay, another race. But like for me, it was always kind of seeing the technical innovations in between races or diving deep into like how something works. That's what always keeps me coming back. And so I'm not the type of person that sees teams who are trying to almost like not bend the rules, but go to like the extent of the regulations and kind of maybe go a little bit over. I don't see that as a problem, honestly. I see that as Formula One. Like that's what these guys get paid to do.
That's innovation. I mean, that's I think why it's so exciting. And speaking of innovation, this is not in your wheelhouse, but I have a question on tires.
Let's go.
Let's go. All right. So, it's two parts. Part one is, over the years, the last handful of years, Pirelli's had, 5 compounds, C1 to C5. Now we have the C0, which is the old C1. So the old hardest tire is now the same tire, but it's the C0, and they introduced the C1, which is like a 1.5 is from last year is the best way I could describe it, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, how much difference do you really see in 6 tire compounds in terms of longevity? And I understand there's a million influences, temperature, track, and the way that the track degrades the tires and the car and the load put on it and all this. But like, honestly, is the C0 to the C1, are we going to see a massive difference amongst, on the harder end of the range? Like, to me, it just feels like they could rock up with the C2, C3, C4 every race, keep the labels the same, forget about the 0, the 1, and the 5, and let the teams choose. But how different are they really amongst those 6 compounds, especially ones close to each other?
Tires and rubber compounds is black magic. I mean, there's like no other way to truly describe it. I mean, it is truly magic. So like a great example would be from the last race in Jeddah, where they, during FP2, whenever they were doing their long run simulations, and you saw, Max was doing the soft tire runs and Checo was doing the medium tire runs. And there really wasn't much of a difference between the two. And why is that? It's because the track conditions themselves warranted the fact that even in that case, the soft tire wasn't the better tire compared to the medium tire. So it's so track specific, like what is the track temperature? What is the surface, how is the surface abrading the tire, things like that, that's allowing it to warm up more or less. There's so much that goes into that. I mean, when you look at like rubber compounds, elastomers, rubbers, whatever, whenever you look at them, the science of how they're designed is so specific to, the way that you want that rubber to work in its optimal range. We call it getting tires into like their window. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about tires, or in my industry, you're talking about like seals, like elastomeric seals. Okay, it's the same thing. They come to life when they're in their window, and they work really well in that window. And there's something called the glass transition temperature of most compounds.
Yes.
And that so
I have winter tires on my car now because of the GTT.
Exactly. When I was in Germany, we had to switch the tires out between summer and winter. It was a complete pain. Like, I hated it. But We're not used to that in Texas, which is where I come from.
No, not many places in the U.S. anymore. Sorry, I cut
Definitely.
you off. So, like, you're right. There's so much that goes into it, and it's just
Yeah.
fascinating.
And the
ahead.
glass transition temperature specifically is that point where you shift from something that is acting more like a pseudo plastic. It's almost very hard, to something that's starting to act more like a viscoelastic fluid, because that's what rubber starts to do when it warms up. Is it's elastic, but it moves like a fluid as well. Right. This is why you'll get things like graining on a tire, for instance. As that surface temperature heats up and the core temperature is lower, you actually get like, it's not a homogeneous temperature distribution through the tire depth or through the tire thickness. So then you get a surface that's warmer than the surface below it. So it actually flows like a fluid.
That's
and
amazing.
it moves out towards the outside of the corner. And that's what graining is. And so like you get these waves of the tire that's actually flowing.
So I'm going to record the last 2 minutes or minute and a half of that and play it for my friends, because I couldn't explain it as well. Basically, what I say is I have tires that turn into rocks in the winter, and I got to put something else on that remains, or like rubber. But anyway, that was better. Yeah. So Doc, one last question on tires. I said it was a two-parter. This is just your personal preference. Qualifying. So we look at quali now, and before last year, we had the rule that if you made the top 10, you made Q3, whatever tire you were on at the end of Q2, you had to use that particular tire again to start the race. It created, in my opinion, and it's an opinion only, it created some strategic conversations for teams who may or may not make Q3, for teams who wanted to set themselves up and take a risk at the end of Q2 to say, here's what I want to start on. For the last year and 2 races, we've seen everyone doing whatever the heck they want. They start on whatever tire they want. This race was the first time we saw a little bit of a decent variation, with Charles on the softs and Lewis on the hards, and pretty much, and I think Sargent was on hards too, but he was a bit the back. And so, like, it just feels as though there's no jeopardy from tire choice and quali anymore. It's just run softs, run softs, run soft. The only strategy is how can you save some, right, when you go out on fresh ones. Are you a fan of having some of those old type of rules? It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but where tire choice and quality matters for the race? Because again, I am. Rob is asleep for the last 2 minutes, but that's okay.
I think it does make qualifying maybe a little bit more spicy. I mean, because when you throw a new compound into the qualifying equation, performance can change drastically from car to car based off of compound. I mean, you saw in Jeddah that the Ferraris were nowhere on the hard tire, right? And then they were a little bit more competitive on the medium with Sainz. And I would say, Charles was probably, more competitive on the soft as well. His start was ridiculous. I don't know if you saw that. Like, he just like leapfrogged 3 people right off the start.
Yeah, talk about a false sense of security there. I thought we were in for a banger here, because as a self-confessed Ferrari fan, when I saw that start, I'm like, yes, here we go. And then that was it for the rest of the race. By the way, I'm not a big tyre geek, and I let Brian kind of dine out on that there. But so Lewis and George at the end of that race, different tyres. Yeah, in theory, Lewis is on mediums to George's hards. Doesn't seem to make a dent in it. Is that because they can't risk Lewis pushing because they're trying to manage that tyre to the end? And if so, why even bother putting him on that compound if he can't even push on it? It felt like a pointless call if that was the reason.
Yeah, honestly, I think they were banking on a late safety car. That's why they put him on mediums. The minute they put him on mediums, I was just tweeting with some friends, and I told them, I go, there's no way these mediums go to the end. I thought they were going to have to pit him, and I was like, they're banking on a late safety car. So I think they were probably doing a bit of management at the beginning with the tires. And then I actually watched the full onboard of Lewis today. And, when he was on the mediums, I mean, he was for a time, he was able to follow George pretty closely. And then, then he kind of started falling off. I think maybe some of that was maybe George pushing as well towards the end. And then maybe by then, Lewis simply didn't have the tires to keep up. But something that Sainz was saying actually after the race was he was, and even Max, I said this like a Dutch person, Max. See, it's rubbing off. But Verstappen was even kind of talking about how in sector 1, there was a lot of sliding around when you got in the wake of the cars. And so I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, because these regulations definitely do make it easier to follow. But this is now 2 races in a row where teams have talked about, when you get close to the car in front, that they're starting to feel like they're sliding around a bit more. So it's almost like pre-new regulations, and I don't know if that has something to do with the tire compounds. I don't know if it has something to do with the changes to the floor regulations, because now they've raised the floors.
They've raised them, right? So maybe they're not maybe they're now more sensitive to the car in front now if they've raised it. But I'm suspecting you know more about that than I do.
I mean, where the direction my head is kind of going with this is that when you had the lower floor edges, then you could do a much better job of mechanically sealing the floors at high speed. And so if the floors are raised like they are now, then you're going to have a bit of a harder time trying to seal the edges of the floor. So it's possible that the weight could be disturbing the edge performance of the floor, which is then bleeding into your in the edges of the floor, which is bleeding under your car, which is then affecting your downforce, which is going to cause you to slide then. So that's kind of where my head's at right now. I'm still trying to flesh that out, but
yeah, I mean, and for me, not having that kind of really depth of knowledge around the aerodynamics, the thing that really brought home to me how much like just tiny bit of interrupting that whole thing can have, and we discussed it on the pod the other week, was Silverstone last year when Max got the little bit of the AlphaTauri wedged in one of the tunnels, and when they showed it after the race, it's like a tiny bit of nothing, and yet the performance drop-off he had, everyone thought he's got a puncture, he's got an engine problem, he must have, he's going so slowly. It's like, no, you've got like a very small piece wedged in the bottom of the car, and that drastically changes how the whole thing performs. So you must have loved pulling the bones out of that one afterwards.
Yeah, I that is always going to be the case with this era of ground effect car, because the predominant downforce generator is the floor. So when you consider or compare to previous generations of cars, you had much dirtier downforce front wing, rear wing, and obviously some floor, although it was a flat floor and diffuser and things like that. But this whole Venturi tunnel effect is massive for downforce. Compare in Silverstone in that exact same race when Charles Leclerc lost his front wing end plate and the guy was still fast, right? So, I mean, he was able to until he was at the end, sorry, Rob, for this one, on the terrible tire strategy there. And he was just left out like a man on an island. Yeah. But that's just an expression right there to show that in previous years, if you would have lost your front end plate, you probably would have had a significant decrease in front downforce or aero balance as a result of that. But he really didn't. And that's because of the fact that the floors are generating the predominant amount of downforce.
Right. So one thing now, being as we've kind of dabbled a little bit around talking about this year, I made a bit of a call on last week's episode after watching Jeddah that I just think we're about to go on an era of Red Bull dominance, because that car looks so insanely good. So even light and day from last year, all of us keyboard warriors can go, oh yeah, the other team should just be able to catch up. They should be able to bolt a new bit of wing on or do something fancy. From your perspective, how significant is it for the other teams to try to even make any kind of headway into closing that gap down?
Yeah, good question. I think we first have to understand why the RB19 is as fast as it is. I mean, everybody points to the side pods, and I think the side pod have an effect, as we can see in Mercedes performance, and as we see in the fact that Aston Martin started out last year with this flying saucer looking side pod that was like, it was the double floor thing they call it, right? Which is, to me, just like terribly ugly. But then they switched to the Green Bull, and kudos to them this year. It's not the Green Bull anymore. It's like honestly a mix of so many different cars, and that water slide is like massive. So they've innovated, and what happened, they took a step forward. Now you're hearing that Mercedes is talking about, well, we don't care if it looks like a Ferrari or a Red Bull, we just want it to be fast. And honestly, I think they're going to go the Red Bull route. They're going to tweak it, they're going to innovate like Aston Martin did to make it their own. But the general concept of the downwashing side pod, getting a lot more air to the rear of the car, to blow lots of air over the top of the diffuser, almost like a double diffuser. So you can drive the floor so much harder. You can work the floor harder. You can generate more downforce. I think that's where the performance is at. I think that's where the pace is at. It's not going to be a downforce monster, but what it will be is a evenly keeled car that's got an aero map, which is good for a lot of different kinds of tracks. And then from there, it's just going to be about aero efficiency. How can you drop drag? So with that concept, you're going to be able to generate a good amount of stable downforce. And then how can you drop drag? Red Bull's been very efficient with that. The thing is very fast in a straight line, and it still has good downforce. Aston Martin, not as fast in a straight line, but a downforce monster, right? So they're kind of somewhere in the middle.
So come on, you got to pin your colours to the mast, though. Will anyone really reel them in, or do you think it's a fight for second? Which, by the way, I love midfield battles. I love fights for podiums.
Well, second isn't midfield per se.
Well, you know what I mean. You mean best of the,
It's
best
the
of
new
the rest.
midfield.
Yeah.
Best of the rest for everyone else. Do you think?
Yeah, so I don't think anybody's going to catch Red Bull this year, honestly. I mean, the delta for me is like it's very large, and the only way that Aston Martin was able to make the gains that they did, I think it was like a 2% delta increase, right, in their time, was over the course of a development year and a winter. So I just don't think you can do that now during the course of a year. So I don't think you can find those gains. I think next year there's a possibility that 100% teams could catch up. And so I think this year it's probably going to be maybe, who's that, again, that fight for second, who's going to be second, who's going to be third. It's incredibly tight. I mean, depending on which mask Ferrari wants to wear for that race, they could be second. Aston Martin looks pretty solid second. And then I think Mercedes and Ferrari are fighting for third and fourth.
Ooh. But you heard the doctor. He said there's potential for next year. Rob wrote us off till the new regs 2026 new engines and everything.
I do.
Said no.
I stand by that. I think that we're in for a Red Bull era now until the next great shakeup is like with any time regs shake things up, like we saw with this new car, right? It was a big equalizer. So
regs shake things up, but it doesn't mean people can't develop and innovate themselves. And with the cost cap, I think it stops Red Bull from driving off into the sunset the same way we might have seen in the past.
It's not like they have no. It's not. You seem to think that that's it now. That Red Bull can't develop anymore. Of course they can.
I'm not saying that. We saw what they did this year. So, Rob and I will disagree. The good doctor is with me that there's a chance before the new regs that we'll see someone challenge him. But I agree also probably not this year.
So that's your prediction then, that it's Red Bull. Do you, and I know you're a Red Bull fan, so do you think Checo can take the fight to Max and we can get maybe like a Rosberg on Hamilton year? Or do you think it's just... do you think it's another one for Max in the bag? Where's your feeling at the moment for your Red Bull team?
I'm such like a middle of the road kind of guy when it comes to predictions. The fact that you were able to pull one prediction out of me is pretty darn good. Now you're going for like the pièce de résistance. You really want me to fight inter-team. I'll just say this. I think Max catches a lot of flack because, he's kind of an up and down character. I think the guy is like a phenomenal driver. I mean, I think he's exceptional. I think Checo's really good as well. Checo has shown that he is very strong on the street courses. Jeddah is a street course. Baku. I mean, a lot of these others are Monaco. So I think Checo is going to have those strong races in the street courses, but I really need to see Checo strong on the traditional tracks, the power tracks and things like that. I think if he can take that step and match Max, then I think there's a chance, legitimately. I hope that Red Bull lets them race.
I do too.
I dove into the whole, I mean, if at Dr Obbs, if you go look at, I did a thread on what happened at the end of the Jeddah race for like the last 12 laps. And it's not the narrative that everybody's putting out there. I mean, they definitely let them race at the end. And there was a good 8 laps of them actually like pushing. And I mean, Checo and Max, their pace was the same. So that was very impressive. And Max was pushing and Checo was pushing. So I'd say Checo definitely proved himself to me a bit there, but I need to see it on more of the traditional tracks until I'm going to be able to say that he's ready to challenge Max.
Well, in addition, you also highlighted the fact that Max came up and pulled alongside Checo and congratulated him on the track, waved and said, "Good job," which the media doesn't want to report.
No.
Yeah, and
they love
really,
the drama.
The reason behind the question wasn't to get you to kind of back one of the drivers or not. It was more that when you've got a car that's so dominant, and now everyone has that age-old debate of is it the car, is it the driver? Well, when you've got, say, both the Red Bulls are going to disappear, then equal machinery, it's really going to come down to who can get the most out of that machine. I think Max is a phenomenal driver. So my personal view is that I think you're right. I think Checo's going to have some tracks where he excels and he seems to be able to dial it in better than Max. But I think over the course of the whole season, there's going to be more of those that fall on Max's side of the garage, I'm going to say, because you're in the UK. I can say garage to you.
Beautiful. Brilliant.
Brilliant. So I'm going to say Max. I don't think Checo has it in him this year to do that kind of Rosberg season. I don't think he'll pull enough of them out of the fire, like you say, of the traditional tracks. But it would be nice for it to keep going like back and forth like this for a little bit, because that'll keep it exciting. So even if we all think that Red Bull's going to win the constructor, if the title can be close between those two, then fantastic, because I don't see anyone else gate crashing the WDC party.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, what do you think about Ferrari? I mean, same thing on the Ferrari side, right? It's like Sainz and Leclerc. I mean, it seems like Leclerc is much more comfortable in the car. I see Sainz like struggling a bit. I mean, even in qualifying, we saw it, right? You look at Mercedes, same thing. It looks like George feels a bit more confident in the car. Lewis is struggling a bit. You know, I think the rear end is twitchy for him. Maybe George is used to a car that's like terrible because he came from Williams. So, you know, I don't know. I think that happens on these teams, right?
Yeah, I think when you look at kind of all the way down history, the makeup of a good team, if you're the team and you don't really care about who wins the driver's title and you just want to win the constructors, then you kind of always want maybe the more talented driver that you think is going to be up there battling for the wins, and then you're Mr. Consistent that's going to be constantly getting podiums to keep the constructors going. My view is that Ferrari, if they actually had a car that could compete, they've got a great balance, because I think Charles is the more naturally talented driver and would probably win 9 times out of 10 over Sainz, but he's also likely to be more likely to bin it. Whereas Sainz, I think, is more consistent, apart from when his engine catches fire.
Did you see him in the gravel every other race?
I know he likes
year?
a bit of gravel, but I think that's just in general. I think Sainz is the more consistent guy, but Charles is going to be the one that will take the victories. The interesting one is Mercedes right now, because obviously they can't keep developing the car for Lewis forever, because he's naturally going to have to retire at some point. He can't keep driving forever and ever and ever. And George looks like the natural successor there. So they're in... Mercedes, for me, are in a weird little kind of handover point where I think George is more comfortable in the car, but you'd probably argue Lewis is maybe still the more talented driver, but the car seems to be more suited to George. So they're in a bit of that interests me, the Mercedes dynamic at the moment. I don't think Lewis will call it quits and we'll end up with Mick and George next year. I'd love to see it, but we won't.
No, I don't think so. And I think, honestly, this whole concept of like designing a car to a lead driver is an interesting one. You know, I know a few people that are either in F1 currently or were in F1 previously. And I remember last year when this whole, you know, narrative of, well, why did Checo start the year out so well and then fall off at the end of the year? They designed the car away from Checo and towards Max. That whole narrative came out. And I remember asking a few people and kind of saying, like, what do you do when you design a car? And the answer was, first and foremost, you design the fastest car. Whatever you think is going to be the fastest, you design that car first. And then when you roll it out during testing and et cetera, you get the feedback from the drivers. You're going to take the feedback and see how you can maybe fit the car to both drivers, or if you need to diverge, which way you're going to diverge. And that divergence is not dependent on the driver feedback. It's dependent on what the engineers feel like has the highest performance ceiling. And that's the direction they're going to go. So once they go that direction, though, they take that decision. The driver that maybe suits that car better, they're going to take that feedback and they're going to use it because they know that that driver fits that car well.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a divergent decision, but it's based off of performance and potential pace. and it goes one way or the other, and then it always fits one driver or not the other, you know.
Yep, and I know I agree. And talking of potential pace, one thing that is very static in its pace is the 100 seconds of DRS, because it always lasts 100 seconds. So on that amazing segue...
I talk too much. Good luck with this one, guys.
No,
Well, I mean,
great.
it could be that you just answer one question in the 100 seconds. It doesn't matter. There's no leaderboard. It doesn't matter how many you get through. But Brian is going to run the timer. You've got me to ask the questions. So, Dr. Obbs, are you ready for the 100 seconds?
I think I'm ready.
Ooh. Brian, are you ready to count us in?
I am. Rob, are you ready for the questions?
I think so.
Here we go. 100 seconds DRS with Dr. Obbs in 3, 2, 1, begin.
First poster you had on your bedroom wall.
Michael Jordan, where he's just slam dunking the moon.
Yes.
Favorite F1 track?
Oh gosh, Silverstone.
Best racing movie of all time?
What's Drive? That's the one? Yeah,
Yeah.
Drive.
Sylvester Stallone?
No,
That's Driven.
it's not. Is it?
No,
That's
it's not.
Driven?
Yeah,
No.
keep
Stop
going.
it, Brian. Stop it. Is a hot dog a sandwich?
No.
Favorite livery of all time on an F1 car?
Oh, the white Red Bull.
What's your favorite cheese?
Oh gosh, the British people love this this British hard cheddar, which for me is not very good. I love a good German Gouda.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your favorite musician or musical group?
Gosh, I'm gonna go classic Rolling Stones.
First memory of F1?
Gosh. I'm gonna say the one that stuck with me for the longest was that race. What was it? That race in Turkey, in Istanbul, where nobody had any grip, and because the track was so cold, and it was all the cars were on ice, and they were just sliding all over the place. Yeah. What year was that? 2020?
19 or 20, yeah.
Yeah.
Would you rather be chased by one horse-sized duck or 10 duck-sized horses?
What? One horse-sized duck.
DRS, good or bad?
We reached time. We reached time before that. I let it
Good,
go.
good. DRS, good.
Agreed. I apologize, Dr. Obbs, for interrupting. I thought you'd said Driven, and I was so thrilled by the fact that you were thinking about the Sylvester Stallone, just horrendous movie that I love.
So bad.
So
It's
I
so
apologize
bad.
for interrupting on that.
Brian, you like that movie? Man.
Do you ever just kind of sit down and turn something on and you go, this is god awful terrible, but you finish it all the way through and then you realize I should watch that again sometime. That's
Yeah,
what happened with
sure.
Driven and Sylvester Stallone. It's horrible.
Yeah. That for me was all of the what's it? The the Austin Powers movies was kind of like that.
Yeah.
They were so to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is cheeky humor, but it's awesome. I love it.
When they take the Indy cars on the streets of Chicago in that movie and all the manhole covers are flying up as they go over them, I'm thinking to myself, this is a
Brilliant.
great movie.
Brilliant.
Oh, man. Oh, well, it was so great to have you on the show, Dr. Obbs. And you can go back to recording your next episode of the Tech Heads with, of course, not just Bryson, but of course Molly, because
Yes.
apparently I forgot that at the beginning, and I feel so bad all the way through this. So please apologize to
No.
Molly on my behalf.
I will do that.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming on. It was brilliant.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really fun. Glad we finally got to hook up to do this. And yeah, I'd love to be back on at any point if you guys got the time as well. It would be a good time.
Dr. Obbs, thanks so much, man. That was amazing. Thanks again, Dr. Obbs, for joining us. Great conversation. And the tire nerd out was just tremendous. Thank you so much.
I could see it in your face when you guys started talking tires. I was like, I might just put myself on mute and go
Well,
make
I
a cup
wasn't
of
kidding when
coffee,
I said I thought you'd been asleep for 2 minutes because it looked like it. But this coming week, we have the Aussie GP, which, if I'm being honest, was really boring last year. Yeah, go ahead. Go. No.
No, it's just in the same way that Red Bull fans are happy this year and last year, and everyone else isn't. You're always happy when it's the team that you follow is either dominating or doing well. So my memory of Australia last year
Because Ferrari did well.
Yes. It wasn't the most exciting race, but I thoroughly loved it because Charles absolutely slammed it, which we'll get to shortly.
Didn't Carlos, wasn't this the one he DNF'd early, went across
Yes.
lost control, went across, and then went into the gravel? He's
I think
Ferrari. Why'd you enjoy it so much? Because Charles did well?
It did as well.
Are
as
you
can do,
anti-Carlos?
really.
Question?
No, but Charles, I think, was pole, fastest lap, and won. I mean, come on.
Yeah, well, what about my boy Carlos? All right, so Rob, kind of fill in a little bit of the background how we got to Albert Park, which is where it's run, and then I'll hit some of the stats about Albert Park.
Yeah, I was looking at what we did last year when we kind of did the preview of it, and we go around and we try to look at some of the history of the tracks and where they've been, and we'd kind of got Adelaide and Albert Park, and this one intrigues me, and it's another thing that we've promised we need to look into, which is like non-F1 championships, and when is a Grand Prix, and when is it an F1 Grand Prix? So you look at the Australian Grand Prix, it's apparently one of the oldest ones out there. It's been held since 1928, obviously not for F1 because that didn't start till 1950. And it's toured around 23 different venues.
Wow.
So obviously they just couldn't get anything they were happy with or whatever. But we had Phillip Island, apparently. Mount Panorama, which does sound amazing, apparently was a really well-loved track. And then it went to, I'm not even sure how to say this, Lobothal Circuit.
Sure.
Yeah. And then the war came. And it bounced around again after the war until Adelaide. And Adelaide was the first time it joined the F1 calendar, which was 1985 to 1995 it ran at Adelaide. A lot of people will say they preferred that as a circuit to Melbourne. But Albert Park in Melbourne in 96 grabbed it and has pretty much been there ever since, I believe, other than maybe a COVID break, but not a change of venue.
Well, COVID break, if you remember, that's where COVID literally was announced to the world. And they stopped the Grand Prix on the Friday. Okay, so let's hit some stats about it. We have not done listener Jaden's jingle in a bit, so here we go.
Looking for stats and my friend, you come to the right place. Sam Stats, yeah.
I do love that one.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and we put the call to arms out there, and so far it's just been crickets. We've had nothing come back. So come on, dirtysideofthetrack@gmail.com. Compose yourself a little Sap Stats jingle or a Pit Lane Pool jingle and get them sent over.
All right. At 58 laps of a 3.28 mile track, they've hosted, as Rob said, 25 Grand Prix since they started there with a little COVID break. Schumacher, the most wins, 4. Jensen and Seb with 3. Of the current drivers, Lewis and Fernando both have 2. Valtteri and Charles have 1 each. Max has 0. So will that change this year, Rob? I'm putting you on the spot.
I went to fact check that because you put like Max 0. I was like, no, that can't be right. Max must have won here. And I hate to say it, but you're right.
So will he win this
So-
year? Let's right now. A week out, no prep. Is he winning?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. By a lot. And there's a little bit of fact behind this too. So starting on pole, 40% of the winners come from pole position. 88% of winners in the 25 GPs have come from the top 4. So, it's not Monaco in terms of the procession we're going to get. There will be overtaking and there will be battles. But if you're not in the top 4, you're pretty much not winning the race, is what's going to, unless something magical happens.
It's a bit of a... It's weird, this circuit. It's regardless of regulations almost, it's never really delivered the best racing there. I think it was always just loved from sentimental value because it was usually the first race of the season, so you could almost forgive maybe not as good race because
F1's back.
Everyone's back. I think as the cars got bigger, it's also got worse because it's not the widest.
It's not a real track; it's a park with some streets that they turned it into.
I'm still looking forward to it. I enjoy watching it. It's just we could maybe do with another set of grid penalties or something to shake the order up because I think otherwise you're right. We'll see the front runners just kind of disappear.
Well, and my Aussie friend Paul has told me he even acknowledges it's not the best race, and Mark on Twitter has told us the same thing in the past as well.
I think most people would love to see it go back to Adelaide because that generated much better racing than the Melbourne track, but
we'll have the same tire compounds as we did in Jeddah, the C2, C3,
Yay.
C4. So Rob, I know you're curious. You can sleep easier now tonight.
Whew.
And there will be, as there was before, 2 DRS detection points, but there are 3 zones. The second point can be used twice. So that's what to look forward to. Anything else you want to hit about years past or last year?
Does that mean we have to get 3 DRS guests on now to match Australia?
No, detection points will count.
Okay, so our guests are just detection points.
I don't know. You said it, not me.
So we kind of already hit this about last year. Charles absolutely dominated, and it was full of promise for the prancing horse. It was a happier time when the world looked rosy and that Ferrari were going to dominate and win both titles. Sorry, I just floated away for a minute.
I have something that just struck me. I have the first submission of Aussie GP 2023 F1 crap. Piastri will finish 9th. Now, I know you're saying that not... Well, hold on. Time out. Calm down. Take a breath. Why are you so angry? That's great crap because he didn't have a steering wheel that functioned. Did he even finish the last race? It was so far back. Him and Lando were battling for 15th with 3 cars in the pits. If McLaren at another high-speed circuit can somehow get in the points, it would be astounding. And for the rookie to do it and to not even be 10th, I'm saying 2 points, baby. 9th. That's not enough for you?
No.
All right, he's doing it. All right. His helmet will have a boomerang on it on one side.
It needs to have something. You know, we've done this on the Discord and on Twitter. There is a difference between just a bold prediction, which I would say Piastri 9th is very bold, but in order to be a completely ridiculous, accurate
prediction, and he
prediction,
crosses the finish line in reverse.
That would be brilliant. So, but
loses
then that's
control.
stupid. That's also not going to happen.
So the tires let
fine
go,
line.
and he turns around the final corner, and he comes through backwards to finish 9th. You're welcome. It's both now.
Oh man! And last year, also just to put oh my gosh, just to put a bow around last year, it was the first race run under the new safety car restart rules to cut out the side-by-side shenanigans. So now you weren't allowed to do that kind of coming up alongside
Max,
and
Super Max.
Yes, you weren't allowed to do the Super Max alongside and eyeball each other and kind of challenge each other to the restart, which I kind of quite like. I did like that. I like that kind of shenanigans. I think there's nothing wrong with it.
As long as you don't pass the guy, I guess it's fine.
Exactly. But we're not allowed to have fun, so they had to get rid of it. And then we talked about Charles dominating. We had Sergio finish 2nd. George Russell was 3rd, and I think, although I didn't clip it from here from memory, we had kind of a 3 British driver in a row then, because I think it was George, Lewis, and Lando. You're not hearing the names Max or Seb or Carlo here because, as Brian said, Carlo went for a trip across the grass. And was that the one where he took the sign out and there was sign wedged under other people? Was that
no? I think this is the one where he lost it, came across the grass, crossed the track, and went into a gravel and just beached himself because he floored it.
Max had some mechanical failure. I want to say something to do with fuel. Fuel pump's always a good go-to if you think you can't think of a mechanical failure, just say fuel pump. And Seb also retired. So. Yeah, I am looking forward to it. Looking forward to it because it is it kind of, for us, it really proves your passion for the sport because you've got to get up at stupid o'clock in the morning to watch it.
If you want to watch it live, and we are not gatekeepers, so if you want to watch it on record, that's fine, but the diehards will be watching it live.
Oh, yeah, we will. We'll be up, we'll be semi-awake, and we'll be trying to take notes, and then we'll probably have to watch it repeated on F1 TV to see all the stuff that we missed. One other thing, just before we say goodbye, is that we've had a couple of requests, both DRS people that we've been interviewing, where we've been having the chit-chat before and after. We've had it on Twitter, and I even got one through on Instagram, which is a few requests of, who is Pit Lane Paul? And we realised that actually when we kind of look at the numbers of the listeners we've been picking up, especially as the season has restarted, there's a whole bunch of you out there that probably have no idea who that random person was last week that was telling everybody that you can't get beer in Jeddah.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
Did you not realise?
No alcohol in Jeddah. And it was hidden.
It was hidden. It was one specific moment that he called it out you had to listen for.
Didn't know.
For everybody out there, Paul is a friend of the show. And he joined us right at the beginning of our journey, and he's come on every single race week and phoned in a report from the pit lane for us. He works for Valtteri, so he's always adorned in his Alfa Romeo merch. And yeah, like I say, he loves to regale us with both race review type insights, but as you heard last week, he's almost a travel fact guy as well. Now, at the end of last season, we did a sort of a thank you video for him. I'm going to add that into the show notes again, just so people can go and see it, because if you don't really understand the types of celebs that this guy's bumped into throughout his career, we took a little snapshot of some of the things that he's shared with us. We threw it all into a video. We set it to music, which listener Andy had created for us, and it was a great montage, and you've got to look out for the Anthony Joshua one in there because the size differential is absolutely fantastic.
It is. And so actually, just one last side note, Paul is tremendous. And he called us from Monaco last year. And he literally walked over to somebody and had them do the intro for him of Pit Lane Paul. And it went like this.
Hey, this is Duff McKagan, and you're listening to the Dirty Side of the Track podcast.
And I cropped it out there so we could use it all the time when it wasn't for Pit Lane Paul. But then Duff McKagan says, and this is Pit Lane Paul. It's really the way that really went. And then Paul basically turned around from Duff McKagan from Guns N' Roses and starts doing his own Pit Lane Paul review at this point. And I'm like, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is, and I think Andy cropped that in at the beginning of the song. So we're going to play it out now for those of you who haven't listened to it because it's absolutely epic. But you also need to go and watch the video just to see some of the celebs that Paul has seen along the way. And with that, we will just leave you with our little thank you tribute to Pit Lane Paul and look forward to what he's going to bring us from Australia next week.
Hey, this is Duff McKagan, and you're listening to the Dirty Side of the Track podcast. I'm here with Pit Lane Paul.
Pits. Paul is in on the pits. He reports from the pits. We all feel we're in the pits. Pits. Paul is in on the pits. He sees stars in the pits. We all feel we're in the pits. Oh, the pits. Paul is in on the pits. Travel facts from the pits. We all feel we're in the pits. Sometimes racing's gonna get you down, but Travelo's Paul takes a look around and brings you country facts while he's standing in the pits. Sometimes racing's gonna get you down, but Pit Lane Paul takes a look around, brings you race facts while you're standing in the pits. The pod, Pit Lane Paul on the pod, bringing guests on the pod. We all love Paul on the pod.
This is Jacques Villeneuve, and you're listening to the Dirty Side of the Track.